Good morning. Today is the 14th day of Tammuz, the 3rd of July. Tomorrow is the 4th of July. We Americans get to celebrate our freedoms, of which we hardly have any left. And we'll continue. Yeah, we did. We got free of the British. Okay. And so we're in the middle of the second piece that has to do with Lo Tochlu al Adam, shouldn't eat with the blood, which the sages explained means shouldn't eat before you pray for your blood or on your blood. So yesterday we explained this, that this has to do with how long you are asleep. That when you are asleep, because the brain is not working, your mind is not working, your heart is still working, but it's not the inner aspect of the heart. So you're oxidizing yourself just at the very, very base level. And so that's called, in the Zohar, the spirit of defilement. Again, the Zohar doesn't mean oxidizing or not oxidizing. The Zohar could care less. In general, Yiddishkeit could care less in a certain sense about what the reality in the world is, because it's not how we judge the world. We judge it on a spiritual level, and from generation to generation there's different explanations about what this might mean physically, but it doesn't really matter what it means physically. Really what matters is the spiritual aspect of it, which is what Yiddishkeit is talking about, and all the different explanations you can give for it are all equally valid. They're all very good. In any case, so when you wake up, you have to wash your hands. Why do you wash your hands? Negovasser, because when you wake up, that spirit of defilement, it leaves you. Because the moment that you wake up, so even just consciousness itself, just the fact that the person is woken up, this takes care of most of that spirit of defilement. At that moment, he's breathing again with his divine soul. He's breathing again as a higher a sentient being. And he's no longer just a slab of meat that's sleeping there. So the spirit of defilement leaves, but it leaves through the entire body, and then it where it really clings at the end is on the fingernails. That's why it's called Nagelwasser, because Nagel in Yiddish and German is nails. Right? So it sticks there.
Why did you wash your toenails?
What?
So why did you wash your toenails?
So you did. A very interesting question. So you did if you were a Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash.
Still do.
Because we usually are not that, let's call it, serving with our feet. But the Kohen is serving with his feet. Because every step that he takes, the ritzpah is mekudeshet. The floor itself is sanctified. Right? This was the big deal in the Beis HaMikdash, that David sanctified. He already did this. This is why it's called Mizmor Shel Chanukat HaBayit LeDavid. Why it's the song of inauguration for David. What's David got to do? He didn't build the temple, Solomon did. But the point is that David did a number of things. And one of the things that he did was he created the platform on which the temple was built. Because you're on a mountain. How do you get the mountain to be flat? So to make it flat, you have to build supporting walls on four sides. They really did it almost only on three sides. On one side, they didn't need a very strong supporting wall because it was very moderately inclined. So they built three supporting walls and then another wall for show. It was like, it's not as strong as the others. And they filled up with kippot, like caverns, one on top of the other, until they came to the level of the top of the mountain, where the stone that's called the Even HaShtiyah, where the world started from that stone, it's considered to be the center of the world, where that was, and then they made a platform, basically a floor that was now level all across the whole size of the mountain. So David did that, apparently. And he sanctified that platform, that floor. So the floor is sanctified. So when the priests came in, they had to wash their hands and their feet. The same thing was true with the tabernacle. Wherever they erected the tabernacle, within the enclosure of what we call the chatzer, so the dirt there became sanctified, even though once they left, the dirt returned back to its previous state. So by the priests, they have to clean both. They have to wash both. But we don't have to wash both, because we don't really use our feet for anything. You can say that the closest we come to it is that we walk to shul. when we pump the pedal on the car to get to shul, whatever, something like that. But we don't really do anything with it. In any case, so the sanctification, but really there's a question in halacha, by the way. There's a big question there about whether you should do the feet also or not, and the conclusion is that we don't need to. So why is it at the very end of the fingers? Why is that where the defilement rests? So we said, or maybe we didn't say that. We did say this yesterday, that the heart is the seat, is considered to be the general seat of the animal soul. And the brain is considered to be the general seat of the divine soul. Now if somebody goes back and looks, is this true 2,000 years ago? Can I find a text from 2,000 years ago that would say something like this? Not sure. Because most of the people associated the heart with the entire soul. But we see that the Torah does, that there are hints in the Torah already that there is a difference between the brain and the heart. In all the other traditions, it took somewhere in the 10th century, I think, or 11th century, when they finally realized that the brain was an important organ. For a long time, they didn't think the brain was an important organ. But Yiddishkeit did know that at some level it is, but Yiddishkeit is not so ingenious, so it wasn't so different from everyone else. But once they hit upon it, so they went back and looked, and they said, there's so many prophecies that do say that the soul in the end has to, and this is going to be one of them, we're going to see this in a second, this verse, that you shouldn't, remember we said that there's another halacha there in the Talmud, it says you shouldn't greet someone before you pray. Why? That you should refrain or retreat from the person whose soul is in his nose. So that's nobody thinks the soul is in the nose. That there's no tradition of. So what is it talking about? So the idea here is the same as the defilement being at the edge of the fingers. The fingers are considered to be the extension of the heart. So if the seat of the animal soul is in the heart, when the animal soul departs and you begin to breathe in, again, the way we're describing it, consciously with your divine soul and so on, so it leaves, and it only remains at the very, very tip of the extension of the heart, the 10 fingers. And why this? Because here it's not flesh. It's like something that's already dead in a certain sense. There's more defilement there because of that. So the nails, they can still hold on to it a little bit, but the whole thing is gone, because the moment you start breathing consciously, it's something else. What about the brain? The brain also has one extension, one finger. What's the extension of the brain?
The eyes.
No. I'm talking about an extension you can actually see protruding. The nose. The nose. Nose is like a finger of the brain. The brain only has one. And by the way, this is very interesting, that the olfactory nerves, you know about this, I don't know about this anything, but my wife told me that the olfactory nerves are the only ones that are connected directly to the brain.
The eye.
No, so she said it's more than the eye. She said it's more than the eye. It's an actual part of the brain that goes into it's not like the optic nerve. She says it's something entirely different. I don't know. I don't understand anything about this. That's what she told me. She told me this when she heard that Mashiach's, what do you call it? His sense is going to come from his smell. That's like something special. And we say that what is the only sense that the neshama enjoys and not the rest of the body? We say that that's smell. And somehow, and the word neshama in Hebrew,
That's why it smells spicy.
right, to give back a little bit of the divine soul. The word to smell in Hebrew is not very indicative, right? Because it's the same word as spirit. Reach and ruach, it's really the same word. But more than that is when we say, how do you say breathing in Hebrew? Neshima, and that's definitely neshama.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that has to do with the higher levels that are beyond nefesh. You don't say nefesh about I don't remember anything that has to do with nefesh, with the nose. But certainly the next two levels, ruach and neshama, they have to do with the nose. Ruach is the reach, is a sense of smell, and and neshama asher neshama ba'apo. So this right away you understand that soul is related to breathing. So what is he saying now? ולכן לכך צריך לכוון קריאת שמע שעל מיטתו כדי שבקומו יישאר רשימו. So what do we do when we say Kriyat Shema before we go to sleep? What we're doing is we're having the kavana that even when we're asleep, just like when I wake up, the remnants of the defiled spirit of the animal soul remain on the edge of the fingers. In the same way, the whole time that I'm asleep, this is like a schnorkel. I think that's how you say it in German even. The nose is I think is a schnorkel. I think it's the same word.
It's just when you go swimming.
No, I know what a schnorkel is, but I thought it's the same word. So this is like a periscope that you've got up when you sleep, right? So when you sleep, there should be a remnant of the divine soul at the very edge. This is its only finger. This is where it is. So this connection. So he says that's what he has. So that there should be a little bit of a residue of the divine spirit the whole time that he's asleep. And because of this is what protects him from all the mizikin, all the different negative spirits during the night. There's another halach that people don't so much follow. You shouldn't eat after midnight. Right? We ignore it now, almost completely and utterly. But there is such a thing that you shouldn't eat after midnight. Why not eat after midnight? Same problem as what we were talking about. That when you eat after midnight, in the world, all the mizikin are around, all the negative forces are around. Why? Because most of the people are asleep. So because most of the people by midnight are asleep, so it's like the consciousness of the world is almost asleep entirely. And so
the halacha is clear about till when you can eat.
Good. Until alot hashachal.
Yeah.
Theoretically. But so where is this? Why don't we do this? I don't know. Why don't we... At least the Zohar says so. That you can't eat after midnight. Because then the whole your blood is now carrying the animal spirit as words. So in general, that those times, that time of day, that time of night, is much harder to elevate. So if you eat something, it becomes part of the blood, and the blood is now ruling or being ruled by the animal soul. So and it immediately becomes part of the blood. What you eat after 72 minutes, it becomes part of the blood. That again, that's the ancient theory of food. So this is very hard to elevate it later. Shenoten chayla rav lechayla dedama, because after chatzot there's a lot of power to the power of the blood, and here we mean blood as in the sense of that the animal soul is the blood. Ki ba'et hazeh eino ela be'apo, because at this time, where do we see that we don't eat after chatzos? You can't put Pesach, for instance. And you can't put, and you're not supposed to daven after chatzot. Really, the time, meaning that Hashem, as it were, is eating the words only until chatzot, and it's only b'diavad that we right. But more importantly, on the mizbeach, that after chatzot, it's considered that everything is eaten already. So there's different halachas. I believe I remember this correctly. That if something falls off the mizbeach, it falls off the altar in the base of Mikdash, after chatzot, it's not considered kochim anymore. Yeah, you don't return it. It's finished. Because it's been eaten as far as it can. So there's a lot of things that do work according to that. We ourselves, we don't do this. I don't know why. It didn't carry over into human affairs. But certainly in the temple and in other areas, or like a special case of chatzos by the afikomen, so it's also we don't eat after midnight, after chatzos. So because at this time the only remnant of his divine soul is in his nose. But when he wakes up and he davens and he prays the morning prayer, Yekabel malchut shamayim, and he takes upon himself the yoke of heaven. Chozeret lekadmuta. Then the neshama spreads. So here it's the opposite. If in the fingers it's leaving, So when it comes to the divine soul, it's the opposite. The moment I start breathing, I breathe it in, it starts spreading inside. So it's retained here at the tip, and then it starts spreading outside. There's a lot of stuff about the nose, maybe we'll talk more about it in a moment. So now we understand clearly what the Gemara says, that you should not eat on the blood, meaning when you don't have the power to elevate it. And why don't you have the power? Because you're all animal soul, you're not divine soul. So when you wake up, even though it's spreading, but it doesn't really spread. This is the chiddush, that it's not just the breathing. Again, breathing by itself is like the animal soul. That's what you did when you were asleep. There has to be an added element. There has to be an added value. Where does the added value come from? From the mind. That when I say Kriya Shema, and I accept upon myself the yoke of heaven, that only a human being can do, only someone who is dedicated to Hashem can do. So that's when now the divine soul is guiding the whole breathing process. As long as he hasn't prayed, this doesn't spread back into him. As we said, that the neshama is just at the tip. Okay, so all this is very good. So now, so we said that the Alter Rebbe, he revisited this whole thing in this week's Maimer in Likutei Torah. But before we look there, so there's a lot of questions that can be asked about this. Is it the same on Shabbos and on weekdays? Why would there be a difference? So on Shabbos, so on Shabbos, you're not allowed to do birur. You're not allowed to elevate anything. You can't take the good out of the bad. You can't select. You can't refine. Do we have another word that we found for biru? I don't remember, except for refine or to sift. I don't remember. Select. So you can't select. You can't elevate. So that's the halacha. That we know is the halacha. And the way that Pnimius, that the inner dimension of Torah understands this, is that if it's prohibited, it means it's not needed. Because otherwise it wouldn't be prohibited. So what does Pnimius of Torah explain? So the inner dimension of Torah explains that on Shabbos everything is elevated anyway. That's why you don't need to do it. So if everything is elevated anyway, so on Shabbos, according to Pnimius, there should be an easier time with eating before praying. Because everything is elevated in it. What's the whole rationale here? Because I'm still mostly animal soul, and if I eat before I say Kriya Shema, before I daven, then the food is going to go directly to the animal. So it's going to go into the power of the blood, as we called it here. And it's going to be very hard for me to extract it afterwards. You also feel it. It's like I'm eating from a place where I'm not yet spiritual enough. And this is something that people are looking for meditations to do, because that's how this generation is. So they want to see. So what do you do? So you think about this. When I'm davening, I'm transforming my entire circulation, my entire self, to be connected to my divine soul. All the breathing I'm doing is like I'm divining my whole body. Like in the same way that you could think about oxygenation. I'm oxygenating all my blood now, but with oxygen that came from thoughts of tefillah, of praying, of connecting to Hashem. So it's a completely different quality of the blood. It's much easier to elevate it. But now if you're telling me that, so that's on a weekday. But now you're telling me that on Shabbos you don't need to elevate anything because everything's elevated anyway. That's why we say that achila b'shavat tanug, that eating on Shabbos is permitted. You can eat whatever you want. So we joke today and we say there's no diets on Shabbos, and it's true, by the way. You can't do a diet 7 days a week. Any naturopath will tell you that the diets are always 80% of the time. That's close enough. It should be something like 84% of the time. And then the remaining 15%, Yudke, is Shabbos. That's like something special. You don't have to do it. So So why can't we eat before davening on Shabbos? So by the way, this is why, in general, people are more lenient on Shabbos. That they do a lot more. Even the people that are not so are makpid on this in the middle of the week, not to eat anything before they daven. So on Shabbos, it's much more easy. It's not as strict. But still, there's a question here of why why wouldn't it be completely permitted? So understand this question. We have to go to a mimer. This is discussed in length in Tzemach Tzedek and Derech Mitzvotecha, that there are two types of eating in general. There's what in the time of the temple. So I'm reading now from a mimer from the Rebbe, who just quotes everything very quickly, so it's much easier than reading everything in the Tzemach Tzedek. So we'll just try to do this in a couple of minutes. והנה כשם שבזמן הבית היו שני עניינים דאכילת מזבח ואכילת כהנים, כמו כן עכשיו גם כן יש שתי אכילות, אכילת חול ואכילת שבת. So in the time of the temple there were two types of eating. There was what the mizbeach, what the altar ate, meaning what was burned on the mizbeach, and what the kohanim ate. And what the priest ate. It was two different, right? One is call it the animal soul, that's the mizbeach, and the kohanim, they represent the divine soul, so they also eat. So now also, and how is it now? Now this has become the eating on weekdays and eating on Shabbos. So that the eating on weekdays is mostly for the animal soul, and the eating on Shabbos is mostly for the divine soul. So the weekdays requires a lot of elevation, a lot of birur, selection, and that's like the mizbeach, that's like the altar eating. And the achilat Shabbat, and eating on Shabbos, when you eat on Shabbos, the tzaddik eats to his satiation. So that's like the eating like the priests ate in the temple. What's the issue here? So eating on weekdays is the avodah of birurim, of clarification, of selection, of elevating the sparks to bring out the good from the evil. As it says in the Zohar, that food time, meaning bread, is a time of war. Why is it a time of war? Because you have to elevate, because you have to fight to get the spark out. Because you have to fight your cravings, so that you're eating for the very fact of elevating the spark that's in the food, and not for anything else. Because the food itself is what we call klipas noga. It's the intermediate husk, which has a mixture of evil in it. And the person is naturally, with his animal soul, is drawn towards the food. That's why it tastes good. That's why you're drawn to it. And therefore food can bring you down, because you're being drawn by your animal soul to the food. So you're strengthening your animal soul. That's the word that we do. שצריך לפעול בעצמו שלא זו בלבד שהמאכל לא יוריד אותו, אלא עוד זאת שהוא יברר את המאכל ויעלה אותו לקדושה. והנה בירור זה נעשה על ידי התגלות נפש האלוקית דווקא. The only way you can elevate is by revealing the divine soul. דלהיות שהאדם מטבעו מצד נפשו במין כל שכן מצד גופו נמשך לדבר הגשמי, משום זה אפשר שלא זו בלבד שלא יפעול לבירור המאכל, אלא עד שהמאכל יוריד אותו. לכן הנה הבירור על ידי התגלות נפש האלוקית דווקא. ולכן, so you just repeat the same thing again. ולכן אסור לאכול קודם התפילה. That's why you're not allowed to eat before praying, before davening. כמו שכתוב, לא תאכלו על אדם, like we just said. ודרשו חז"ל, לא תאכלו קודם שתתפללו על דמכם. As the sage said, you shouldn't eat until you pray on your blood. כי דווקא על ידי הקדמת עבודת התפילה, שלאדם פועל בעצמו התגלות נפש אלוקית, אפשר להיות עבודת הבירורים. Because only when you spread the divine soul through yourself, you have oxygenated yourself with your divine soul, only then can you uplift the sparks of the food that you're eating. והיינו, שבלא הקדמת עבודת תפילה, הנה כיוון שהעבודה היא בדרך מלחמה, בעניין מלחמה שגם לעומת זה מתגבר, כמו שכתוב לא מימץ, אי אפשר להיות הבירור, ודווקא להקדמת תפילה, שבו בעצמו התגלות נפש אלוקית, הנה על ידי זה בכל לנצח את המלחמה. והיינו שבשעת הבירור גופה, אי אפשר לפעול בעצמו התגלות נפש אלוקית. Meaning, that once you're already engaged in eating, what is it saying? That you have to pray first. So I'll have thoughts when I'm eating. Not enough. You have to prepare first, like any war. Any war that you go to, you have to make preparations. The preparations are to spread the divine soul through your body. ורק על זה שמקודם לכן פועל בעצמו התגלות נפש אלוקית, אזי יכול לפעול הבירור בגשמי. That's the only way to do this. So tomorrow we'll answer why is it that on Shabbos there's also the same union. But it's surprising, again, because we said that on Shabbos everything is elevated by itself. So we'll see this tomorrow.